My fiancée publicly humiliated me before our engagement while I paid for everything, so I ended it silently, and she regretted ever underestimating me. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and I thought I'd finally found the woman I could spend my life with. My life wasn't perfect: long hours at work, weekends spent catching up on side projects, and the constant hum of bills, but I'd managed to carve out stability for myself. I like things predictable, reliable. Relationships had always been tricky for me. I tended to be cautious, slow to trust, and even slower to let someone in. But Amanda, she was different. From the first week we met, there was this spark. Something that made me believe I could let my guard down. Amanda had a way about her: charming, attentive, the kind of person who made you feel like you mattered. She laughed at my terrible jokes, remembered small details I barely noticed about myself, and somehow made time with her feel effortless, even in my busiest weeks. My family and friends immediately liked her. They commented on how warm and genuine she seemed, and that approval meant a lot. I'd never met someone who seemed so aligned with my life and values. Someone whose presence felt like a quiet reassurance rather than chaos. Our early months were blissful. Long conversations that stretched into the night, weekend plans that involved hiking, cooking together, even just binge-watching shows on the couch. We talked about the future dream houses, trips we wanted to take, how many kids we might have someday. Amanda listened when I shared my goals, her eyes reflecting excitement and genuine interest. I'd never had someone support my ambition so unconditionally. There were small moments, little hints of reality that I didn't think much of at first. "I've been trying to save, but bills are killing me this month," she mentioned casually one evening while scrolling through her phone. I felt this mix of concern and pride. I wanted to help, to make her feel secure, to show that I could provide in ways that mattered. It wasn't about money, it was about trust. About building something meaningful together. By the end of that week, I was walking home after our dinner date with a smile I hadn't felt in years. Completely convinced that I was building more than a relationship, I was building a life with someone who genuinely cared. I had no idea how quickly that belief would be tested. Over the next few months, I found myself going the extra mile for Amanda without even thinking about it. It started small, covering dinners, buying tickets to concerts she wanted to see, occasionally picking up gifts just because I knew she liked them. I didn't see it as an obligation. It felt natural, almost like I was showing love in the way I knew best. But slowly, the gestures got bigger. Weekend trips, a new phone when hers started glitching, even helping with some of her student loans. Each time I handed over money or made a sacrifice, I told myself it was worth it. She was worth it. Amanda seemed happy, genuinely grateful, or at least that's how it felt. She would light up whenever I surprised her, hugging me tight, whispering, "You always know how to make me feel special." I would grin, feeling that rush of pride. The kind of fulfillment you get from seeing someone you care about truly happy. I told my friends about the small things I did, the way she responded, and they would nod, impressed. They could see how much I was investing in her happiness, and I told myself that as long as she appreciated me, nothing else mattered. But little things started creeping in, subtle enough that I almost ignored them. Amanda began casually mentioning more expensive tastes. "I wish we could go somewhere tropical," or "This bag would be perfect for work." At first, I brushed it off as harmless daydreaming, but there was a hint of expectation in her tone, a way of phrasing it that made me feel like it was my responsibility to make those dreams real. Then there were the social situations. At a small dinner with friends, she laughed a little too long at another guy's joke or casually commented on someone else's achievements, almost testing my reaction. I caught myself feeling that familiar prick of insecurity, but I quickly dismissed it. She loved me, right? And besides, I was providing, caring, giving. Surely that counted for something. By the end of another long week, I found myself lying in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to ignore the small unease creeping in the back of my mind. Something felt different now, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Was it just my imagination, or was this the first crack in what I thought was uncheckable trust? Things started to feel off around the holidays. Amanda and I were invited to a friend's small house party, something casual and cozy, but as soon as we walked in, I noticed the way she moved differently. She laughed a little too loudly at someone else's jokes, leaned closer than necessary to people I didn't know well, and occasionally glanced at me with that teasing smirk that used to feel playful but now felt sharp. I caught myself tightening my jaw, forcing a smile, pretending it didn't bother me. But the pit in my stomach was growing. During dinner, she made a joke about my job, lightly mocking my long hours and dedication. "You're always working so hard, you probably live at that office," she said, laughing at her own comment. Everyone else chuckled politely. I forced a laugh too, nodding, trying not to let my irritation show. Later, she whispered, "Don't take it personally, I just like teasing you." I wanted to believe her, but the words didn't feel comforting anymore. It wasn't just the teasing. The financial side of things was getting harder to ignore. Amanda casually suggested upgrading her phone again, even though I had bought her a new one just months prior. "It's just so slow," she said with a shrug, as if it was my responsibility to fix it. I nodded, feeling a mix of frustration and the urge to please her, telling myself that it was okay to support someone I loved. But that small voice in my head kept nagging. Was I overextending myself? When we got home, the apartment smelled faintly of her perfume, a comforting scent that used to make me feel close to her, but now it felt suffocating. I sat on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening in my mind. The teasing, the little digs, the expectations, it all piled up in a way I hadn't noticed before. I realized that what I thought was playful behavior might be a deeper disregard for me, a subtle shift in respect. My heart sank as I wondered if the woman I was planning my life with had always been this way, or if I just started noticing now, and in that moment, I understood that something about our relationship had changed, and I wasn't sure I could ignore it anymore. Planning our engagement should have been exciting, but it started to feel heavier than it should have. I spent weeks coordinating details, the ring, the venue, guest lists, making sure everything was perfect. I wanted Amanda to feel special, to know I had thought of every little thing. I imagined her walking into a room filled with people who loved her, her eyes lighting up as I got down on one knee. That was the dream I held on to. Amanda seemed excited too, but there were small, nagging moments I couldn't ignore. "I think it should be bigger," she said one night, scrolling through engagement posts online. "Invite more people. Everyone will want to see this." At first, I laughed, trying to brush it off. But the way she said it, so casually, made me feel like nothing I was planning was ever enough. I pushed the thought aside, telling myself she was just being playful, that she was excited. Friends and family noticed my efforts. They complimented me on how organized and thoughtful I was, and I felt a quiet pride swell in my chest. But Amanda's attitude around others started to bother me more and more. At a small dinner with some of our mutual friends, she subtly commented on my finances again, joking about how I was always so generous and making me feel both appreciated and oddly exposed at the same time. I started to notice little patterns, her charm in private, the subtle digs in public. At the time, I didn't want to overreact. I wanted to trust her, to believe that the woman I loved would never intentionally hurt me. Yet, every interaction began to feel like a test I was unknowingly failing, and it left me uneasy in a way I couldn't shake. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I could feel the first real cracks in our relationship. Something was shifting beneath the surface, and I couldn't tell if it was temporary stress or a deeper problem. A knot formed in my stomach as I realized that what should have been the happiest time of our relationship was starting to feel like a minefield. I closed my eyes, hoping I was overthinking. But deep down I knew something bigger was looming, and I didn't know if I was ready for it. It happened at a small pre-engagement dinner with Amanda's friends and a few of mine. I'd spent the day making sure everything felt comfortable, arranging the seating, checking the food, and rehearsing a few light jokes to keep the evening easy. I thought we were in control, that this would be a night of laughter and connection. I couldn't have been more wrong. Amanda arrived looking stunning, as usual, but there was something different in the way she carried herself. Almost immediately, she began making little jabs, tiny, harmless comments about my work, my apartment, my choices. "You really work too much," she said loudly while everyone laughed. "I mean, you can barely even keep your apartment clean sometimes, right?" The room chuckled awkwardly, and I froze, my stomach twisting. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but the words stuck. Her smile was smug, triumphant even, and that casual cruelty hit me like a punch I hadn't seen coming. She didn't just tease. She humiliated me in front of everyone I cared about. The warmth, the charm I had fallen for, was gone. In its place was a sharp edge, and it cut deep. I felt heat rising to my face as my mind raced. Months of covering expenses, supporting her dreams, believing in us, it all felt meaningless in that moment. "Amanda," I started quietly, my voice trembling, but she interrupted with laughter. "Relax, I'm just joking," she said, shrugging like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. I excused myself to the kitchen, heart pounding, hands shaking. The room was suddenly too loud, the air thick, my confidence shredded. I leaned against the counter, tasting bile and disbelief. How had it come to this? How had the woman I loved, who I trusted completely, turned me into a public joke in front of people I respected? And as I stared at the cold countertop, trying to calm my racing thoughts, a single terrifying realization hit me. If she could do this now, before our engagement, what would she do later? The question burned in my chest, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. After that dinner, I didn't speak to Amanda for the rest of the night. I went home alone, walking through the cold streets with my hands shoved into my pockets, my mind replaying every humiliating word she had said. The laughter, the smirk, the way everyone had looked at me, it was all etched into my memory like a slow, painful film. I felt small, exposed, and for the first time in months, completely alone. The next morning, I tried to pretend it didn't affect me. I went to work, sat at my desk, and forced a smile at my colleagues' greetings. But every email, every phone call, every little interaction felt heavier than usual. My chest felt tight, like I was carrying the weight of that dinner everywhere I went. Amanda sent me a text that afternoon, casual and light. "Don't be mad, I was just joking. You know I love you." I stared at it for what felt like forever, my thumb hovering over the reply button. How could I respond without sounding weak, without showing the depth of the hurt I felt? I started to notice other things, two subtle patterns I had ignored before. Her friends texting her privately, laughing about little things she didn't bother to hide. Small comments that were meant to needle me, like reminders that she had options, that she held power in our relationship. My pride battled my love, but it was becoming clear that love alone wasn't enough to make me feel safe or respected anymore. By the end of the week, I felt drained, hollow even. I didn't want to see her, didn't want to answer her calls. And every time her name popped into my head, a tight knot formed in my stomach. I realized that the woman I had trusted completely, the woman I had planned a life with, was slowly eroding everything I valued about myself, my confidence, my dignity, my sense of worth. That night, lying on my couch with the city lights bleeding through the blinds, I stared at the ceiling, feeling utterly powerless. The humiliation had stripped me down to something raw and fragile, and I knew that this was just the beginning of a storm I hadn't yet figured out how to survive. A week later, things got worse, much worse. Amanda had posted a story on social media, something small, something casual looking, but it stung in a way I couldn't ignore. It was a photo from that same pre-engagement dinner, her smiling at the camera with a caption that read, "Spoiled again." Lucky me. Everyone could see it. Friends, coworkers, distant relatives. The implication was clear. I was the one bending over backward, paying for everything, and apparently, it was laughable. I stared at my phone for what felt like hours, my chest tight, my fingers trembling. Months of sacrificed late nights at work, weekend trips I funded, constant support boiled down to a single public joke. I felt exposed, embarrassed, and powerless all at once. Every instinct in me wanted to confront her, to yell, to demand respect, but something in me froze. How had I let it get this far? When she called later that evening, I didn't answer. I sat on my couch in the dark, feeling the weight of betrayal crush me. Her texts were playful, sweet, coaxing me to respond, but I couldn't. Every time I imagined her laughter at my expense, my stomach twisted in knots. I felt small, humiliated, and completely alone even though I had invested everything in someone I thought I could trust. The apartment felt suffocating. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint smell of her perfume lingering in the air, even the creak of the floorboards, it all reminded me that this wasn't a nightmare I could wake up from. This was my life. And the woman I loved, the woman I planned to marry, had publicly shown the world she didn't respect me. I felt like I was losing myself. The confidence I had built, the patience I had nurtured, even the pride I had felt in supporting her, it was slipping away, evaporating into humiliation and disbelief. I had hit a point I never imagined I would, staring at the ceiling with tears threatening to fall, asking myself over and over, how did it get this bad? How could someone I trusted treat me like this? And in that crushing, lonely silence, I realized I had to do something. I just didn't know what yet. After that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to react impulsively, scream, or beg for respect. I knew that wouldn't change anything. Instead, I started creating distance, both emotionally and financially. I stopped covering unnecessary expenses, started saying no to things I didn't feel comfortable with, and began investing more of my energy into myself, my career, my side projects, my friends. I wanted to feel like I mattered again, to remind myself that my value wasn't tied to someone else's approval. Amanda noticed. Her tone shifted subtly in texts and calls, a mix of annoyance and confusion. "Why are you being so distant?" she asked one evening. I replied casually, "Just busy with work and life, that's all." I didn't explain my anger, my humiliation, or my hurt. I refused to hand her the power over my emotions again. The calmness in my voice seemed to unsettle her more than any confrontation ever could. I also started observing her more carefully, noticing little patterns I had previously ignored. The way she expected attention when it suited her, the way she flattered others publicly while taking subtle digs at me. But instead of reacting, I made mental notes, building a quiet strategy in my mind. I felt a spark of clarity that had been missing for weeks, a sense of control I thought I had lost. Even my friends noticed the shift. They commented on how composed I seemed, how my energy had returned. I smiled quietly, knowing they didn't fully understand the storm I had endured, the humiliation I had swallowed in silence. But seeing their reactions reinforced something inside me. I could reclaim my dignity without drama, without losing my sense of self. And yet, Amanda's subtle attempts to push back kept the tension alive. Her casual, teasing texts, the way she expected me to respond immediately, They reminded me that the battle wasn't over. I clenched my jaw, staring out the window at the city lights below. Feeling the quiet power building inside me. I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative anymore. Not now, not ever. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. There were no shouting matches, no public scenes, no tearful pleas. I simply stopped making plans with Amanda, stopped answering her calls immediately, and stopped bending over backward to meet her expectations. When she noticed, she tried to provoke a reaction. "Why are you acting like this?" she asked over text one evening, the words sharp but tentative. I replied calmly, almost coldly, "I think we need to take some space. I'll reach out when I'm ready." Her silence after that told me more than words ever could. For once, she didn't have control over my emotions. I didn't need to justify my feelings, explain my hurt, or beg for her to understand. I had finally drawn the line. Months of humiliation, manipulation, and public teasing had taught me one thing. My dignity mattered more than any relationship. No matter how long I had invested, friends noticed the shift immediately. When I finally told a few close ones that I had ended things, they were shocked not by the decision, but by the way I had done it. No drama, no spectacle. Just quiet, unshakable resolve. That calmness, that refusal to let her see me crumble, was more powerful than any argument I could have had. I watched from a distance as Amanda's charm began to crumble. Friends and acquaintances who once admired her were now catching glimpses of her entitlement, her subtle cruelty, and her disregard for respect. She tried to reach out, to charm, to manipulate, but it was too late. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. I was no longer the one humiliated, the one scrambling for approval. Sitting alone in my apartment that night, I realized something profound. I hadn't needed to yell, to shame, or to seek revenge publicly. By staying silent, by protecting my own dignity, I had already claimed the victory. The humiliation she had inflicted on me could not touch me anymore, not after I had reclaimed control. And in that quiet, almost imperceptible moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. A deep, steady sense that I had chosen myself first, and that choice was worth everything. From a distance, I started noticing the ripple effect of my decision. Amanda's carefully curated image, the one she flaunted online, the one that had made me feel small in front of everyone, began to crack. Friends and acquaintances who had once been charmed by her subtle manipulations started seeing the cracks. Casual comments she made in group chats, offhand jokes at other people's expense, even her little digs about me, suddenly, they didn't seem funny anymore. People noticed. She reached out, of course. Texts, calls, even messages on social media. Each one carefully designed to reel me back in, to remind me of all the good times she thought we had. I didn't respond. I watched quietly as she flailed, her charm no longer effective. The power I had lost in that humiliating dinner, the same power she had wielded so effortlessly, was now mine again. It was oddly satisfying to see her attempts fail. There was no gloating on my part, no need for public shaming. The world around her was already showing her reflection, and she couldn't control it. The friends who had once silently approved of her behavior began asking questions, noticing the pattern I had endured in silence. She started to realize too late that she had underestimated me completely. Every time I scrolled past her posts or heard about her attempts to charm others, I felt a quiet sense of triumph. I hadn't needed to confront her directly. I hadn't needed to humiliate her back or make a scene. My silence, my calm, my decision to protect my dignity, that had done more than any words ever could. That evening, I sat on my balcony, feeling the cool night air brush against my face. The city hummed below, lights flickering in the distance. I felt something I hadn't in months: clarity. I had taken control, reclaimed my sense of self, and watched quietly as someone who had sought to belittle me realized too late that she had lost, And in that quiet victory, I understood something essential. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't loud, it's silent. Unwavering and absolute. After Amanda faded from my daily life, I started noticing how much space had opened up for me emotionally, mentally, and even physically. I hadn't realized how drained I had been until I no longer felt the constant tension of trying to please someone who had never truly appreciated me. I poured myself into things I had neglected: my work, hobbies I had sidelined, and reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in months. It felt like reclaiming pieces of myself that I didn't even know I'd lost. I reflected a lot on the past months. The early excitement, the long conversations, the plans for the future. I could now see the subtle patterns I had ignored. Amanda's teasing, the casual digs, the public displays that undermined me. They hadn't been harmless. They were warnings I had chosen not to heed. And that realization, though painful, was liberating. I could finally learn from it, understand my boundaries, and recognize what I would and wouldn't accept in the future. Emotionally, I felt stronger than I had in years. The humiliation, the betrayal, even the months of doubt, they had taught me resilience. I no longer felt defined by someone else's perception of me. Instead, I felt grounded in my own worth, my own standards, and my own decisions. I didn't need external validation. I only needed to honor myself. I also began to rebuild my social world in a way that felt healthier. Friends who had watched silently began to notice the difference in me: calm, composed, confident. Even strangers could sense the shift in energy when I entered a room. I realized that my growth wasn't just internal. It radiated outward, shaping the way the world perceived me. That quiet internal victory became my foundation. Every day I woke up feeling more in control, more empowered, and more certain that the choices I had made, especially the one to walk away silently, were the right ones. And as I sat back and looked at the life I was reclaiming, I understood something important. Healing and empowerment often come not from confrontation, but from self-respect and steady, unwavering boundaries. Months passed, and life continued without Amanda's shadow hanging over me. I wasn't obsessing over what she did or how she felt. My focus was entirely on myself. I had rebuilt my confidence, my routines, my social life, and even my career. Every project I tackled, every goal I reached, reminded me that I was capable, strong, and completely independent. The humiliation she had inflicted no longer had power over me. It was just a memory of what I had survived. Then, unexpectedly, I heard through mutual friends that Amanda had tried to reach out to several people in our circle, attempting to explain herself, to charm her way back into their good graces. But the responses she got weren't what she expected. The friends she had once subtly manipulated were now seeing the full picture: the public teasing, the constant digs, the sense of entitlement she carried. And in those reactions I found quiet satisfaction. She had overestimated her power and underestimated me. I realized that my victory didn't need to be loud or dramatic. I didn't need to humiliate her back. I didn't need to create a scene, and I didn't need validation from anyone but myself. The dignity I had preserved, the calm I had maintained, and the boundaries I had enforced were already my revenge. In my silence, she had already experienced the consequences of underestimating me. Sitting on my balcony one evening, watching the city lights shimmer across the skyline, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible months ago. I could finally breathe freely, knowing I had protected myself, reclaimed my worth, and learned an invaluable lesson about love, respect, and personal boundaries. And in that moment, I smiled, not with triumph over her, but with triumph over myself. I had chosen me over humiliation, self-respect over approval, and independence over compromise. I had survived the storm, and on the other side, I found something stronger than I had ever imagined: peace, clarity, and empowerment that no one, not even her, could ever take away.